What's up, geeks? Welcome back for another episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever, the weekly web show that proves it's okay to be a geek. We're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez.
So they announced that Terminator 5 would be coming out in 2015, potentially being a reboot to the original franchise, not really acknowledging the other four films, aside from featuring Arnold Schwarzenegger, being about Terminators and shotguns, maybe?
Shotgun? Probably motorcycle.
Not to mention that Ed Catmull, president of Pixar, was quoted as saying that Pixar moving forward will have a new original movie every year, but have a sequel or a follow-up to an original property every other year. Having 1.5 new films is the way that he said it. So that brought up an interesting topic, springboarding off of last week's episode about the top 10 movies of this summer. More than half of them are sequels or returns or reboots of some kind. So it got us to thinking, what are the good things, the bad things, and how would we solve franchise fatigue in Hollywood?
Piggybacking off of what I said last episode, which was the next film that I'm most excited about this summer is actually Pacific Rim. There are a few very specific reasons why that is. One, it's robots versus monsters. That's it. It's Guillermo del Toro, so reason number 2. But reason number 3 is that it's not based off of anything. Sure, it's derivative of a lot of things that have come before it, but it's not based on a comic. It's not a sequel. It's not a remake. It's not a prequel. And so that originality is something that I'm really looking forward to. And it could be terrible. I don't see it being terrible, but at least it's unique. At least it's original. And with the news of the Terminator franchise and Ed Catmull, as much as some people are reading it as, oh great, we get a new original film every year, the buzzword in my head is we're still getting sequels every other year. They're specifically focusing on things we've seen before. The cynical part of me, and it's probably bigger than the non-cynical part of me, is just, dear Lord.
Brave 2, Return to Scotland.
Oh, no. No. It's not so much a lack of originality, because apparently it's out there. It's studios willing to spend money on those original ideas.
That's
because
true.
They are a gamble. They
Yeah.
really are. Original ideas are a huge gamble for the studios. Why not just reboot, rehash, remake all these things that we know we love, all these properties we know we love? It makes financial sense for the studios to do that.
I don't mind sequels so much as you're exploring new territory. Like a good example of that could be the Toy Story films. In the Toy Story universe, we all wanted to go back and be with those toys again, but I didn't want to have another fight against the new toy and the bad toy. If Toy Story 2 was Robot Rex comes and threatens both Buzz and Woody, that would be a bad thing. But instead, they explore more of the core idea of the franchise, which is really like mortality and an unlimited amount of time that you have. The toys specifically only have so much time in a child's life, and then what do you do when you are replaced? That's the first one. The second movie is more about where can you find yourself after that. Of course, focusing on Jesse and Woody's opportunity to be enshrined in a museum, and what does it mean to be a toy? And then third, even though it kind of seems like they're digging deep in the well, it's a genuine close to the 3-part trilogy where when the actual day comes along where you're no longer needed, how do you cope with that? And it's more about that story. And I appreciate exploring the world, but at the same time exploring new facets of the same idea. I think the problem with something for, say, Spider-Man. Amazing Spider-Man, not that amazing. He retreads literally the same story from the first film. Yes, it looks more 2012 than it did 2002, but we didn't go anywhere new. It was confusing, and it was frustrating, and ultimately kind of sad. So if we are going to have sequels, the thing to avoid would be the lack of exploring new territory. I think everyone in Hollywood that I've met so far all have good ideas. It's just an interesting conglomeration when you mix things together of good ideas that ultimately become bad, and conflicting ideals, I think, is what it comes down to. Somebody who needs to make money versus somebody who wants to tell a story, and those don't always go along together. Ultimately, though, there is no such thing as originality, as Kirby Ferguson argues in Everything is a Remix. It's a highly intelligent web documentary that I would encourage you all to go to. I'll include a link right down below.
Do it.
It's amazing, and it makes a good point of how we do stand on the shoulders of giants, and we learn from those who've come before us, and every prolific filmmaker has his inspirations. They have the people who came before them and who they more or less emulate their style before creating their own. You can see that in like J.J. Abrams specifically, where he tries to emulate some of Spielberg's, maybe to not great effect, but he tries. But you can see influences in that filmmaking style that definitely have roots in filmmakers we're still familiar with. And that's very interesting.
Sequels to me are like that scene in Will Ferrell's basketball movie Semi-Pro. The first time we saw an alley-oop, it blew people's minds. But you do it so often and it sort of becomes commonplace in a basketball game to see an alley-oop, but when it's done right, it is unforgettable. Besides the sort of battle between the movie studios and the creative people, one of the more frustrating things is these original ideas that nobody supports. Even after the studio has put their sort of hat in the rink and said, yes, do that, we support you, here's a bunch of money, and it doesn't make any money at the box office. And so they go, that's why we don't do that. That's why we're going to make a 5th Terminator film, or we're going to make a 5th Pirates of the Caribbean film. Who's asking for that? Oh, that's right. The moviegoers are asking for that because they're paying tons of money.
The wallets are voting.
Yeah, the people are voting for these movies with their wallets. I sort of get what Ed Catmull is saying. It's a good plan, I suppose. The part of me that is cynical sees a plan to specifically spend time on making sequels, which I think is a mistake. Just like with the Terminator franchise, they're going, this is going to be a sequel. Time out, give us the first movie first and we'll decide if we want to see 2 more films after that. Ed Catmull and the people over at Disney and Pixar are going, we're specifically making sure that every other year you get a sequel. Now, granted, in between we're getting an original movie every year. I have to sort of see that as the silver lining, because the 2 of the movies that Pixar has at least announced, Inside Out and Dia de los Muertos, they seem very intriguing properties, and I'm really excited that those at least exist, especially on the sort of coattails of the announcement that there are no new hand-drawn animated films being produced at that studio, which still blows my mind. It's unfathomable to think that Disney is not drawing anything anymore on paper.
It's not quite the same thing, but it's at the same time, if they're doing the same stories, if they're doing the same type of techniques, I'm still okay with it, even if it doesn't look like my old, because now we're going to be the old crotchety moviegoers on this couch going, in my day, we used to have it drawn by hand.
We're Statler and Waldorf. We've just turned into Statler and Waldorf. Because I hear sequel, and 9 out of 10 times I think cash grab for the studio. But if it's a property that, like, I'm still waiting for the announcement for Incredibles 2. That I would be excited about, because that's a property that you could easily make new stories each and every time with the same characters in the same environment, and it wouldn't get old. Whereas Finding Dory is essentially going to be another story where someone gets lost and they have to find somebody. That's exactly what we did the first time around. Not that I didn't love that movie, and I would love to just see that world on screen again in 4K 3D or something like that. I don't need it.
No. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of Best Geek Vlog Ever. To keep up to date with all our latest episodes, hit the subscribe button right here. New episodes are uploaded every Monday. To catch up on our old episodes, click one of the annotations here on the side. This one's one of my favorite. #taglines.
I like that one up there.
We kind of tied. If you have a suggestion for a topic on next week's episode, leave it in the comments section down below, or hit us up at our Twitter at EpicHappensHere. For Best Geek Vlog Ever, we're your hosts, Brenden Toda and
Ezequiel Gutierrez, reminding you that every weekday is a geek day.